In the immaculate mansion, a girl scrubbed the floor in silence, trying to erase dirt that wasn't there. What she was really trying to clean was the pain hidden beneath her stepmother's cold orders. But everything changed when her father walked in and saw what should never have happened. This beautiful story of overcoming adversity and love interested you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. Continuing. On the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, one of London's most emblematic architectural symbols, little Beatrice rubbed the Italian marble floor with her delicate and already injured hands. At 7 years old, her calloused fingers struggled against invisible dirt, while the soap stung the small cuts on her skin. The luxurious apartment, with its privileged view of the London skyline, was impeccable as it was painful for the girl who, day after day, was forced to keep it that way. Under the watchful eye of Cecilia Blackwood, her stepmother, Beatrice, felt the weight of an impossible perfection. Cecilia, with her designer jewelry and French perfume that cost more than many earned in a month, observed her stepdaughter's every move with ill-disguised disdain. "Do you see that stain? How can you not see it?" Cecilia's voice was soft, almost musical, but carried a coldness that made Beatrice tremble. "Go back and clean it properly. How long will I have to teach you the same thing?" Tears silently streamed down Beatrice's face, mixing with the soapy water. She had learned that crying loudly only made things worse. Cecilia detested exaggerated displays of emotion, as she used to say while adjusting her gold bracelets. "It's already clean. Please." Beatrice's childish voice was barely a whisper. It was exactly at this moment that the penthouse door opened. Edward Rivers, a technology entrepreneur and Beatrice's father, entered carrying a leather executive brief. He had left an important meeting early, feeling an inexplicable unease. Now standing in the entrance hall, the scene before him froze him in place. His daughter kneeling on the floor like a medieval servant. His wife, the woman he had fallen in love with after the painful separation from Beatrice's mother, observing the scene with a satisfied smile on her perfectly painted lips. The dissonance between the reality he was living and the one he imagined living was deafening. "What's going on here?" Edward's voice faltered, torn between disbelief and growing anger. Cecilia spun on her heels, her silk dress making an elegant movement. The smile she offered her husband was rehearsed, too perfect to be true. "Darling, you're home early. Beatrice is just learning some values about domestic responsibility. Nothing major." She approached to kiss him, but Edward subtly dodged. Come here," he called his daughter, who hesitated, looking nervously at her stepmother before getting up. The girl's small hands were red and had small wounds. Edward crouched down, examining them with a lump in his throat. How had he not noticed before? How many signs had he ignored in the name of the illusion of a perfect family? "Is this what you call values?" he questioned, showing his daughter's hands to his wife. "Edward, don't be dramatic. Children hurt themselves all the time playing. Don't turn a scratch into a tragedy." Cecilia's condescending tone echoed through the apartment. "Anyway, I have to get ready. We have the Happy Child Foundation charity cocktail in 2 hours." The irony did not escape Edward. A foundation to help needy children, while his own daughter suffered at home. He hugged Beatrice, feeling her tense in his arms as if affection were something strange and potentially dangerous. "Go to your room, Bea. Rest a little, okay?" "Daddy will talk to you later." The girl nodded, her eyes still downcast, and walked silently down the corridor leading to the bedrooms. Her steps were calculated, as if she feared making too much noise. That night, the couple attended the charity event. Cecilia shone in her red dress, smiling for photographers, and greeting influential personalities with the grace of a first lady. Edward observed everything, as if watching a strange and disturbing film. The woman beside him, who enchanted everyone with her elegance and speeches about compassion, was the same one who hours earlier had watched with pleasure as his daughter scrubbed the floor until her hands bled. When they returned to the penthouse, the silence between them was palpable. The nanny, Mrs. Adelaide, an elderly woman from Cornwall with firm hands and a soft heart, informed them that Beatrice was already asleep. Edward thanked her and dismissed her for the night. "I'll check on her," he said, loosening his tie. "Don't wake her, Edward. She needs to rest for school tomorrow." The false concern in Cecilia's voice disgusted him. Ignoring his wife's warning, he walked to his daughter's room. The decor was impeccable, like everything in that house. Pastel walls, toys organized with millimeter precision, a canopy bed fit for a princess. But there was something disturbingly artificial about that space, as if it were a movie set and not a real child's bedroom. Beatrice slept curled up, as if trying to occupy the smallest possible space, even in dreams. Edward sat on the edge of the bed and lightly stroked her hair. The girl immediately startled, sitting up in bed with wide, fearful eyes. Sorry. I'll clean it properly tomorrow, I promise." The words tumbled out of her mouth. Edward's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. What kind of monster had he brought into his daughter's life? And worse, for how long had he been a silent accomplice to this abuse? "Calm down, honey. It's me, Daddy, it's okay." He tried to hug her, but the girl remained tense. "Bea, I want you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest. Does Cecilia always make you clean the house like this?" Beatrice lowered her eyes, biting her lower lip. "Can I trust you, Daddy?" The question hit him like a slap. A 7-year-old child shouldn't have to question if she can trust her own father. He had failed on levels he could barely comprehend. Yes, Bea always, from now on always. Gradually, between hesitations and nervous glances at the door, as if fearing her stepmother might appear at any moment, Beatrice told him about her routine. The forced chores, the punishments without food when she disobeyed, the whispered insults when Edward wasn't around. "She says if I tell you, you won't believe me because adults always side with other adults." The girl's voice was a thread. "And that if you do believe, you'll be sad with me for making you fight with her." Edward swallowed the lump in his throat. Every word was a knife in his chest. How had he been so blind? How had he not noticed the signs? "Bea, listen carefully to what I'm going to say." He held his daughter's small hands gently. "This is not your fault, none of it. And I'm going to fix everything, I promise." That night, Edward couldn't sleep. Lying next to Cecilia, who snored peacefully, he felt as if he were next to a stranger. In the days that followed, he began to carefully observe the dynamic between his wife and daughter. He noticed the way Beatrice flinched at the sound of Cecilia's footsteps, how her eyes constantly checked if everything was in order, how she asked permission even to get water in the kitchen. One morning, pretending to go to the office, Edward returned silently after Cecilia left for her coffee with friends at Westfield, London. He found Mrs. Adelaide helping Beatrice hide her injured hands under children's gloves. "Mr. Rivers." The nanny was startled. "I didn't expect you home now." "Adelaide, how long has this been going on?" he asked, pointing to the colourful gloves that hid the reality. The woman, who had worked for the family since before Beatrice's mother's death, hesitated. Her wrinkled face twisted into an expression of guilt and fear. "I tried to protect the girl, sir. I swear to God I tried, but Mrs. Blackwood threatened to fire me, and I need this job to support my grandchildren back in Cornwall." Edward felt shame. Even the housekeeper had noticed what he, blinded by the desire to maintain the appearance of a perfect family after the trauma of divorce, had failed to see. "Don't worry, Adelaide. You won't lose your job. But I need you to tell me everything. I need to know the truth to protect my daughter." And so, sitting in the marble and stainless steel kitchen, while Beatrice drew in the living room under the nanny's watchful eye, Edward began to understand the extent of the nightmare his daughter was living. A nightmare that would end soon, he promised himself, whatever the cost. The next day, Edward missed work for the first time in years. Instead of going to his office in the City of London, he drove to Child Protection Services, CPS, in the area. The receptionist, a young woman with deep dark circles under her eyes and a tired expression, seemed surprised to see a man in an impeccable Italian suit enter a place normally frequented by people in precarious situations. "I need to talk to someone about my daughter," he said. His voice choked with contained emotion. "I think she's been mistreated." The employee nodded without showing judgment and directed him to a room where he met Florence Day, a child protection counselor for over 15 years. With her grey hair tied in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to have seen everything, she listened attentively as Edward described what he had discovered. "Mr. Rivers, situations like this are more common than you imagine, unfortunately. And the first step you took coming here already shows that you are on the right track." Edward felt a pang of guilt. He didn't deserve praise for finally noticing something he should have realized long ago. "What do we do now?" he asked, his hands restless on his knees. We will activate the protection system. A social worker will make an apparently routine visit to assess the situation. Meanwhile, keep your eyes open. Document any evidence, and above all, do not confront your wife directly yet. Abusive people can become unpredictable when they feel they are losing control. Edward left Child Protection Services with mixed feelings of relief and apprehension. The gears had been set in motion. Now it was a matter of time until Beatrice was safe. But a question persisted in his mind as he drove back home. How would he rebuild the trust his daughter had lost in him? How would he repair the damage of his negligence? At the red light on Oxford Street, looking at London's grey sky, Edward made a silent promise. For Beatrice, he would face any battle, even if it meant confronting the demons he had brought into his own home. Notting Hill, with its colourful streets and graffiti-covered walls, seemed a world apart from the luxurious Sterling Tower. In a renovated townhouse that served as the headquarters of the Specialist Social Services Referral Centre, SSRC, Louisa Meadows organised her desk for another day of work. At 38, with 15 of those years dedicated to protecting vulnerable children, the social worker carried on her face the marks of someone who had already faced difficult battles against powerful people. The phone rang, and Florence's voice from Child Protection Services sounded on the other end of the line. "Louisa, we have a case that needs your expertise. High-class family, Kensington Gardens, suspected psychological abuse and domestic exploitation of a 7-year-old child." The social worker jotted down the details as Florence explained the situation. Her successful entrepreneur, a respected socialite, a girl who apparently lived in excellent material conditions but suffered abuses invisible to society's eyes. The father himself reported it. Louisa couldn't hide the surprise in her voice. "Yes, and that's rare. Usually it's teachers, neighbours, rarely one of the parents." Hanging up, Louisa examined her notes. Edward Rivers, CEO of Rivers Tech Solutions, one of the country's most promising technology companies. Cecilia Blackwood Rivers, a socialite known for her work in charity foundations. And Beatrice, a girl who, behind the designer clothes and enviable address, possibly lived a daily nightmare. "Cases like these are always the most difficult," she murmured to herself, as she searched the computer for more information about the family. Reports showed Cecilia smiling at charity events, always impeccable, always praised for her big heart. A quick search on social media revealed carefully edited photos of a seemingly happy family. Beatrice appeared in few images, always dressed like a small adult, tense smile, dull eyes. Louisa scheduled the visit for the next day, identifying herself only as a social worker on a routine visit. Upon arriving at the luxurious Sterling Tower, she was greeted by the doorman who, after confirming her identity, led her to the private elevator that went directly to the penthouse. Cecilia Blackwood opened the door personally, wearing a pastel silk set and discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. Her smile seemed rehearsed, as if she were posing for a magazine cover. "Ms. Meadows, welcome to our home. Would you care for coffee? Perhaps tea? We have a wonderful selection imported from England." The social worker accepted the coffee, carefully observing every detail of the environment as she was led to the living room. The apartment was a show of sophistication. Designer furniture, original artwork on the walls, panoramic view of central London. Everything seemed straight out of a decorating magazine. "Your home is truly impressive," Louisa commented, noting the absence of any sign that a child lived there. No toy out of place, no children's books, no trace of the typical disorder of a home with children. "Thank you. I believe organization reflects our mind." Cecilia served coffee in fine porcelain cups. "So is this visit part of a specific government program?" I confess I was surprised by the contact. "It's a standard SSRC procedure. We conduct random visits to families with school-age children to check general development conditions." Louisa maintained a neutral, professional tone. "I'd like to talk to Beatrice as well, if possible." A slight tremor passed across Cecilia's perfect face, so subtle it almost went unnoticed. Her fingers lightly tightened around the cup handle. "Of course, no problem. Beatrice is in her room studying. You know how private schools are these days, so much homework even for the little ones." She smiled, quickly regaining her composure. "Beatrice, come here, darling. We have a visitor." The girl appeared in the hallway moments later, wearing an impeccably ironed light pink dress, Her brown hair was pulled back in an elaborate bun, more appropriate for an adult than a 7-year-old child. Seeing the stranger sitting on the sofa, her eyes showed a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hello, Beatrice. My name is Louisa. I'm here to chat a little with you and your family." The girl shot a quick glance at her stepmother before answering in a low, controlled voice. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Meadows." "Isn't she sweet?" Cecilia put her arm around her stepdaughter's shoulders. Louisa didn't fail to notice how Beatrice stiffened at the touch. "So well-behaved always. I insist she learns good manners from an early age. Beatrice, would you mind showing me your room? I like to see where children spend their time." Again, Beatrice looked at her stepmother, as if asking for permission. Cecilia nodded with a tense smile. "Of course, but don't take too long. Beatrice still has lessons to finish." The girl's room was as organized as the rest of the house. Had a canopy bed fit for a decorating catalogue, shelves with perfectly aligned books, a desk with school supplies arranged at precise angles. Everything in pastel tones, everything immaculately clean. A doll's room, not a real child's. "Do you like your room, Beatrice?" Louisa asked when they were alone sitting on the edge of the bed. The girl looked at the closed door. Hesitant. "It's pretty." Her answer was rehearsed. "Empty. And what do you like to do when you're not studying? Play with dolls? Draw?" A fleeting sparkle passed through the girl's eyes upon hearing the word draw. She looked at the door again and lowered her voice. I draw sometimes, but I can't show it to anyone." "Why not, dear?" Beatrice hesitated again, biting her lower lip. Finally, after another nervous glance at the door, she knelt and removed a loose floorboard, revealing a small hiding place. From there she took out a simple worn notebook, completely different from the elegant school supplies displayed on the desk. "Mrs. Adelaide gave it to me. She said I can draw whatever I feel." Louisa leafed through the notebook, her heart aching with each page. Dark drawings, small and solitary figures, a tall and menacing female figure. On one of the pages, a brown-haired girl was kneeling on what appeared to be a floor with red hands, while a blonde woman watched standing. "You draw very well, Beatrice. May I ask who these people are?" The girl looked at her own feet. "It's me. And it's her." It wasn't necessary to specify who her was. "Please don't tell I showed you. She'll get angry. Don't worry, this stays between us." Louisa returned the notebook, which Beatrice quickly hid in the secret compartment. "Beatrice, you know you can tell me if something is making you sad or scared, don't you?" The girl nodded, but her eyes revealed doubt. "Daddy said the same thing, but—" She hesitated. "But what, dear?" "She says no one believes children, that adults protect adults, and that if I speak I'll go to a bad place, far from Daddy." Louisa felt a wave of anger, carefully controlled under years of professional training. This was a classic abuser's tactic: isolate, threaten, create fear. "Beatrice, that's not true. There are many adults whose job is precisely to protect children. Like me," she smiled gently. "And if someone is hurting you in any way, it's important to tell." The conversation was interrupted by knocks on the door. Cecilia entered without waiting for a reply, her perfect smile now tenser at the edges. "Is everything all right here? Beatrice needs to get back to her studies, and I imagine you have other visits to make today, don't you, Miss Meadows?" The message was clear. The visit was over. Louisa thanked her, promising Beatrice they would meet again, and followed Cecilia back to the living room. "I hope you saw that Beatrice is a very well cared-for child. We have the best doctors, the best school. We provide every opportunity." Cecilia spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to not being questioned. "Yes, the material conditions are excellent." Louisa maintained professional neutrality. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Rivers. We'll be in touch." As she left the building, Louisa felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. There was something very wrong in that magazine Perfect House. Behind the silk curtains and rehearsed smiles, Beatrice was being harmed, not with hunger or cold, but with a more subtle and equally devastating type of violence. In her small SSRC office, Louisa drafted a detailed report. The signs were clear to any experienced professional: the fear in the child's eyes, the constant need for her stepmother's approval, the revealing drawings, the hands with subtle marks of inappropriate work for her age. The phone rang as she finalized the document. "Louisa Meadows." "Ms. Meadows, this is Edward Rivers. I was at Child Protection Services yesterday. I heard you visited our home today." The man's voice sounded anxious, almost desperate. Louisa confirmed his identity and suggested a meeting in person, away from Cecilia's eyes and ears. They arranged to meet the next day at a discreet cafe in Chinatown. Chinatown, with its strong Asian influence, seemed a world away from the cold luxury of the Sterling Tower. At Sakura Cafe, a small establishment frequented mainly by university students, Edward Rivers looked out of place in his Italian-cut suit. Deep dark circles marked his face, and his fingers drummed nervously on the table. "Thank you for meeting me. Ms. Meadows, I didn't know who else to turn to. First, I need you to understand something fundamental, Mr. Rivers." Louisa was direct. "My commitment is solely to Beatrice's well-being. I am not here to judge your marriage or your personal choices, but if your daughter is being harmed, my job is to intervene." Edward nodded, rubbing his tired eyes. "I understand, and I accept my share of the blame for not noticing sooner. Please tell me what you saw during your visit." Louisa described her professional observations, the signs of stress in the child, the excessive control exerted by Cecilia, the indications of psychological abuse and exploitation. She mentioned the drawing notebook, explaining the meaning of those images from a psychological point of view. "Does this correspond to what you've observed at home, Mr. Rivers?" "Yes," his voice faltered. "Since I opened my eyes to the situation, I've noticed things I ignored for years. How Beatrice tenses up when Cecilia enters the room. How she asks permission for everything, even to drink water. How her clothes are always impeccable, as if she's afraid of getting dirty playing. And are you prepared to confront your wife on this matter? Because, let's be frank, this will likely result in the end of your marriage." Edward looked out the window, watching the street traffic. Students laughing, elderly people walking slowly, everyday life continuing its course while his private world crumbled. "My marriage ended the moment I saw Beatrice kneeling on that floor. I just hadn't realized it yet." He looked back at Louisa. "What do I need to do now? We need concrete evidence of the abuse. Your word against hers won't be enough, especially considering your wife's social standing. People like Cecilia have resources to manipulate public opinion, hire expensive lawyers, turn accusers into villains." Louisa spoke from experience. "Do you have any way of documenting what happens when you're not home?" Edward thought for a moment. "I can discreetly install cameras, and I have access to all the electronic devices in the house through the security system I installed. That would be useful, but be careful. If Cecilia discovers them, she might become more cautious or worse, take it out on Beatrice." Louisa hesitated before continuing. "There's another matter, Mr. Rivers. Your housekeeper, Mrs. Adelaide. She seems to have some protective bond with Beatrice, considering the drawing notebook she provided. Could she be an ally? Adelaide has worked for us since before Beatrice's mother died. She loves my daughter, but she's afraid of Cecilia, afraid of losing her job. She has grandchildren who depend on her salary." "I understand. Perhaps we can assure her that she won't lose her job if she cooperates with us." Louisa checked her watch. "I need to go back to the office now, but I want you to know that you are not alone in this battle. The child protection system has its flaws, but it also has committed people." Edward held Louisa's arm as she stood up to leave. "How long will this take?" "Every day that passes is a day my daughter suffers. We will act as quickly as possible, but we need to do everything within the law, Mr. Rivers, so that Beatrice is truly protected in the end." Leaving the cafe, Edward felt a mix of hope and fear. The battle ahead would be difficult, against a formidable opponent. Cecilia was not just his wife. She was an influential woman, respected by London's high society, known for her philanthropic work. Who would believe that behind that perfect facade hid a person capable of tormenting a helpless child? On his way back home, he stopped at an electronics store and discreetly bought small security cameras, easy to hide and with direct transmission to his cell phone. The silent war had begun, a war for Beatrice's liberation. The luxurious spa in Mayfair was frequented by London's elite. Between hot stone massages and imported mud baths, socialites exchanged gossip like currency. Cecilia Blackwood smiled as a masseuse worked on her tense back, but her eyes were alert, observing her friends who chatted about the latest scandalous separation of the moment. "You won't believe it," Regina Matthews, a senator's wife, began, lowering her voice dramatically. "I had a strange visit yesterday. A social worker. Can you imagine? As if my children didn't have the best of everything. Cecilia's body stiffened under the masseuse's hands. Social worker, why? Regina shrugged, adjusting the towel covering her body. Apparently they're random visits to check on the conditions of school-age children. Ridiculous, if you ask me. They should focus on places where children really need help, not in homes like ours. You also received one of these visits? Monica Pratt asked, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Cecilia hesitated for only a second before replying with a calculated smile. Yes, last week. A Miss Meadows. I made it very clear that our Beatrice has everything a child could desire. These government people always looking for problems where none exist, Regina huffed. As if we who dedicate time to charitable institutions would be negligent with our own children. Cecilia murmured in agreement, but her mind worked quickly. Regina's visit couldn't be a coincidence. Someone had alerted the authorities, someone suspected, and she had a good idea who it might be. Upon returning to the penthouse, she found Edward in his study working on his laptop. His smile didn't reach his eyes when she leaned in to kiss him. "How was the spa, darling?" he asked, discreetly closing the computer screen. Invigorating as always. She sat in the armchair opposite his desk, crossing her legs elegantly. "I met Regina Matthews. Do you know what she told me?" "That she also received a visit from a social worker." Curious, don't you think? Edward maintained a neutral expression, although his heart raced. "It must be some new government program." "Yes, it must be." Cecilia smiled, a cold smile that didn't match her delicate face. "But, you know, I kept thinking, it's strange that this is happening precisely now. You wouldn't have something to do with it, would you, Edward?" "Why would I?" His voice remained calm, though his hands were tense under the table. "I don't know." She stood up, smoothing the skirt of her Chanel suit. "Just wondering. After all, you've been so distant lately. I thought you might be unhappy about something." "I'm just busy with work, Cecilia. The international market expansion is demanding more than I expected." She nodded, an elegant tilt of her head. "Of course, work. Well, I'll go see how Beatrice is. She's been so inattentive with her lessons lately." When Cecilia left, Edward exhaled slowly. The veiled threat did not go unnoticed. She suspected, and that could complicate everything. Discreetly, he sent a message to Louisa Meadows. "She knows something is happening. We need to act faster." In Beatrice's room, Cecilia found her stepdaughter sitting at her desk, solving simple mathematical equations. The girl straightened her posture immediately upon noticing her stepmother's presence. "How are your lessons, darling?" Cecilia's voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold as a London winter. "I'm finishing." "Mother Cecilia." The child called her stepmother that way at her insistence, although the word always felt heavy on her lips. Cecilia examined the notebook, running her perfectly manicured fingers over the pages. "Your numbers are crooked here," she pointed to an exercise. "And you're taking too long. An intelligent girl would have finished long ago." Beatrice's small shoulders hunched. "Sorry, I'll do better." "Yes, you will." Cecilia sat on the edge of the bed observing the girl. "Beatrice, that social worker who came here, what did you two talk about when you were alone?" The pencil in the girl's hand trembled slightly. "Nothing important. She just wanted to see my room." "Just that? You didn't talk about me or your father or how you feel?" Beatrice kept her eyes fixed on the notebook. "She asked if I like living here. I said yes." Cecilia smiled, satisfied. "Good. Because you know what happens to children who lie, don't you? They go to terrible places far from their parents. Places where no one cares if they're hungry or cold." A single tear rolled down Beatrice's face, falling onto the notebook and blurring one of the numbers. Cecilia sighed theatrically. "Now look what you've done. You'll have to redo the whole page." Meanwhile, in the SSRC office, Louisa Meadows stared at Edward Rivers' message with concern. If Cecilia was suspicious, she could intensify the abuses or worse, become more careful, better hiding her actions. "Florence, I need to talk to you," Louisa called her fellow child protection counselor. "The Rivers case is getting complicated. The suspect seems to have realized she's being investigated." Florence frowned. "This is dangerous. People like Cecilia Blackwood are masters of manipulation. She'll try to control the narrative." "Exactly. And she has the resources for it. We need to speed up the process." The two professionals discussed strategies, aware that they were dealing with someone powerful and unscrupulous. Louisa decided to make a new visit to Beatrice's school, seeking more information from teachers and staff who might have noticed signs of abuse. The Elite Academy, one of London's most expensive and exclusive educational institutions, boasted an imposing neoclassical facade. Louisa was received by the headmistress, Dr. Valerie Fields, a middle-aged woman with aristocratic airs. Social worker? I don't understand the reason for this visit. Our students come from the best families in the city. Dr. Fields, I am investigating a specific case, and I would like to speak with Beatrice Rivers' teacher, if possible. The mention of the Rivers surname caused a visible change in the headmistress's posture. The Rivers are important patrons of this institution. Mrs. Blackwood is on the board of directors and contributes generously to our scholarships. I understand. But my visit is strictly professional and confidential. I am only interested in Beatrice's well-being. Reluctantly, the headmistress led Louisa to a meeting room and sent for Rachel Saunders, the girl's teacher. Rachel was young, recently graduated, with intelligent eyes and an air of someone who observed more than she spoke. Beatrice Rivers. The teacher repeated when Louisa explained the reason for her visit. She is an unusual student. Unusual how? Extremely obedient. A perfectionist to the point of anxiety. If she makes a mistake, even a small one, she becomes visibly distressed. Rachel hesitated. In the first few days of class, I noticed marks on her hands. When I asked, she said she was helping with cleaning at home. I found it strange considering we know they have staff. Did you report this to anyone? The teacher lowered her eyes. I tried to talk to the headmistress. She advised me not to get involved in students' family matters, especially from influential families. And Beatrice's interaction with other children? Almost non-existent. She keeps to herself during recess, always reading or studying. When other children approach, she seems not to know how to react. Louisa made detailed notes. And what about Mrs. Rivers? Does she participate in school activities? She never misses a meeting or event. Always elegant, always smiling, always making a point of mentioning the family's donations to the school. Rachel hesitated again. But Beatrice changes completely when her stepmother is around. She becomes even quieter, more tense. Once, after a choir performance, I overheard Mrs. Blackwood telling the girl that she had embarrassed the family by singing too softly. Any other behavior that caught your attention? The teacher thought for a moment. Beatrice draws, when she thinks no one is looking. Drawings. Disturbing for a 7-year-old child. Dark figures, scenes of humiliation. Did you keep any of these drawings? I have one. Rachel opened her folder and took out a folded sheet of paper. The drawing showed a small figure kneeling before a large, menacing figure. The small figure had red marks on her hands and tears in her eyes. I found this in the classroom trash. Beatrice threw it away when she realized I was looking. Louisa examined the drawing, feeling a tightness in her chest. It was clear evidence of the girl's suffering, but it wouldn't be enough. They needed more. Back at the SSRC, Louisa received an unexpected phone call. It was Mrs. Adelaide, the Rivers housekeeper. Miss, I'm sorry to bother you. Mr. Rivers gave me your number. The old woman's voice trembled. I need to tell you something about little Beatrice. They arranged a discreet meeting in a square near St. Paul's Underground Station. Mrs. Adelaide seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if fearing she was being followed. Mrs. Blackwood, she began, twisting a handkerchief between her calloused hands. She's not what she seems. Ever since she married Mr. Rivers, she treated the girl like a nuisance. At first it was just harsh words, constant criticism. Then she started demanding that Beatrice do household chores, even though they have staff for that. What kind of chores, Mrs. Adelaide? Cleaning the marble floor with her hands, arranging her crystal collection piece by piece, spending hours organizing the closet by colors and styles. The elderly woman wiped a tear. I've seen the girl scrub the same spot for an hour, because the madam said it wasn't clean enough. I saw her hands bleeding, miss. And why didn't you report it sooner? I'm scared. The sincerity in the woman's voice was palpable. Scared of losing my job, scared of what Mrs. Blackwood could do. She has important friends, you know. Politicians, judges. I once heard her on the phone talking about how she got a journalist fired for writing something she didn't like. Louisa nodded, understanding. Mrs. Adelaide's fear was justified. People like Cecilia Blackwood could silence criticism with a phone call, destroy reputations with an insinuation. And what about Mr. Rivers? Did he never notice anything? The master always worked a lot. When he's home, Mrs. Blackwood is a different person. Sweet, attentive. And the girl learned to hide her suffering. Children are like that, aren't they? They adapt even to the most terrible situations. The conversation was interrupted by Louisa's cell phone ringing. It was Edward, his voice urgent. "We need to talk now." Cecilia discovered one of the cameras. Louisa's heart sped up. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Mrs. Adelaide, now more than ever, we need your help. Would you be willing to testify officially about what you saw?" The elderly woman hesitated, fear evident in her tired eyes. Finally, she nodded. "For Beatrice, yes. That girl deserves a chance to be a real child." Meanwhile, in the Sterling Tower penthouse, the atmosphere was one of an impending storm. Cecilia, holding a tiny camera between her fingers, stared at Edward with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You put cameras to spy on me? In my own home?" Her voice was controlled but laden with menace. "What's going on, Edward? First the social worker, now this." "You know exactly what's going on, Cecilia." He maintained a firm posture, though his heart pounded. "I saw what you do to my daughter. I saw how you treat her when you think no one is looking." A cold smile formed on Cecilia's painted lips. "What do I do? Educate a child you always spoiled too much? Teach discipline and responsibility to a girl who will one day manage a fortune?" "Discipline?" Edward repeated, incredulous. "You call it discipline to make a 7-year-old child scrub the floor until her hands bleed? To threaten and humiliate her daily? Don't be melodramatic. Beatrice needs to learn that life isn't just privileges. Even being born into a golden cradle, she needs to value work, perfection, excellence. That's not education, Cecilia. It's abuse." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and definitive. Cecilia narrowed her eyes, all pretense of calm disappearing. "Abuse? You dare accuse me of abuse? I, who dedicate my life to charity institutions, who am respected by all of London society." She let out a humorless laugh. "No one will believe you, Edward. No one. I'm not seeking society's approval. I'm protecting my daughter. Your daughter." The contempt in her voice was palpable. "You always put her above everything, didn't you? Above our marriage, above us. Well, keep her, but don't think I'll leave quietly. Don't think you can expose me, humiliate me without consequences. What do you intend to do, Cecilia?" She smiled, recomposing her mask of elegance. "You'll find out very soon, darling. Very soon." That night, Beatrice went to sleep with fear in her heart. She had overheard part of the argument between her father and stepmother, hidden behind her bedroom door. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew something big and frightening was brewing, like dark clouds before a storm. As she tried to sleep, the girl picked up her secret drawing notebook and opened it to a blank page. With a red-colored pencil, she drew a heart broken in half. On one side, shadows. On the other, a timid ray of sunshine trying to break through the darkness. It was her heart, divided between constant fear and a newborn hope that, perhaps, just perhaps, the nightmare could finally end. The rain fell relentlessly over London, transforming the already chaotic streets into makeshift rivers. In Louisa Meadows' apartment, the silence was broken only by the sound of drops hitting the window and Edward Rivers' nervous breathing. Sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. "She's going to retaliate," he said, finally breaking the silence. "I know, Cecilia. She never loses, never backs down." Louisa nodded, understanding. "People with your wife's profile tend to react aggressively when confronted. They are masters at reversing roles, turning victims into aggressors and vice versa. She has powerful connections, friends in the press, in the judiciary, in politics." Edward ran his hands over his tired face. "And she discovered the camera before I could get truly compromising recordings. We still have Mrs. Adelaide's testimony. My visit report, Beatrice's drawings, the teacher's observations." Louisa tried to sound confident, though she knew that this evidence alone might not be enough against someone like Cecilia Blackwood. "And there are still other cameras she hasn't found, right?" "Yes, 3 of them, strategically installed in the rooms where Beatrice spends most of her time." Edward hesitated. "But I fear what might happen while we wait to gather more evidence. What if she takes it out on Beatrice? What if she realizes I'm monitoring and starts being more careful. That's why we activated the Emergency Protection Protocol. A Child Protection Services agent is discreetly monitoring the building. If there's any indication that Beatrice is in immediate danger, we can request temporary removal. Edward's phone vibrated. A message from Cecilia. The press will love to know how the great Edward Rivers spies on his own wife. Maybe I'll give an exclusive interview about your controlling and paranoid behavior. Think carefully about what you're doing. He showed the message to Louisa, who frowned. Veiled threats, classic. She's trying to scare him. Make him back down. The social worker made a note on her pad. Mr. Rivers, I need to ask, is there anything in your past she could use against you? Anything that could harm your image as a father? Edward reflected for a moment. I worked a lot in the first few years after Beatrice's mother died. Perhaps more than I should have. I was running from the pain, diving into work while hiring nannies and housekeepers to care for my daughter. He looked out the window, watching the rain. That's how I met Cecilia, at a charity event. She seemed so dedicated to children, so understanding about my situation as a widower. I thought she would be a good influence on Beatrice. The irony is cruel, Louisa murmured. But that's not a crime, Mr. Rivers. Many parents work too much, especially after a trauma like yours. The important thing is that now you are determined to protect your daughter. But will it be enough? Cecilia can paint a picture of me as an absent father who suddenly decided to interfere with the education she was giving Beatrice. That's why we need concrete evidence of the abuse. Something that no media manipulation can distort. At that very moment, in the Sterling Tower, Cecilia Blackwood was on the phone with Gustav Miller, owner of one of the city's largest newspapers and her longtime friend. Gustav, darling, I need your help. Her voice was sweet as poisoned honey. I'm going through a delicate situation with Edward. He's been unstable, paranoid. He installed cameras around the house, hired people to investigate me. That doesn't sound like the Edward I know, Gustav replied, skeptical. He's always been a balanced man. People change, darling, Cecilia sighed theatrically. The pressure of business, perhaps. I don't know. I just know that I fear for my safety and my stepdaughter's. Edward has been controlling, verbally aggressive. What can I do for you, Cecilia? Just a small favor. If negative news about me appears in the coming days, especially related to my relationship with Beatrice, I'd like you not to publish anything without hearing my side first. She paused, calculated. You know how these social workers and child protection counselors are desperate for attention, always looking for problems where none exist, especially in prominent families like ours. Hanging up the phone, Cecilia smiled at her reflection in the dressing table mirror. There were 3 more phone calls on her list. A judge who frequented her charity events, the director of an important television station, and an influential politician who owed her favors. By the end of the night, she would have a solid protective network against any accusation. Meanwhile, Beatrice was sitting on the edge of her bed, watching the rain outside the window. Mrs. Adelaide had just left after putting her to sleep, hidden from Cecilia, who had forbidden the housekeeper from showing any excessive affection for the girl. The child couldn't sleep. Her father's and stepmother's raised voices earlier that day, the tense atmosphere during dinner, the furious glances Cecilia shot at Edward. Something was happening, something big and frightening. A lightning flash illuminated the room, and Beatrice hugged her worn teddy bear, the only gift she kept from her biological mother. Cecilia had tried to throw it away several times, calling it a dirty old rag, but the girl always managed to rescue it from the trash and hide it. The bedroom door opened silently, and Beatrice stiffened, fearing it was Cecilia. To her relief, it was her father. Still awake, little one? Edward smiled, sitting beside her on the bed. The storm is too loud, Beatrice lied. She didn't want to admit she was scared, not of the storm, but of what was happening in her family. I understand. Edward hugged his daughter, feeling her initially tense, then gradually relaxing in his arms. "Bea, we need to talk about something important." The girl looked at him, her large brown eyes full of apprehension. "Remember the lady who came here the other day?" "Louisa," Beatrice nodded slowly. "She's helping us resolve some difficult situations here at home." Edward chose his words carefully. "And perhaps soon you'll need to talk to other people like her. People whose job is to ensure children are safe and happy." Mother Cecilia said people like that take children to bad places, Beatrice whispered, fear evident in her voice. Edward felt a wave of anger as he realized how Cecilia had manipulated his daughter, using fear to silence her. That's not true, Bea. They are good people who want to help, and I will be with you the whole time, I promise. Will Mother Cecilia be angry? Probably yes, there was no point in lying. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you are well, safe, happy, as every child deserves to be. What if she punishes me, or doesn't let me eat again? Beatrice's innocent words revealed horrors Edward could barely process. How many times had his daughter been deprived of food as punishment? How much suffering had happened right under his nose, while he was busy expanding his business empire? That won't happen again, Bea, never again. The determination in his voice was palpable. From now on, I'm here to protect you, always. As father and daughter talked, a third camera, discreetly installed in the bedside lamp, captured every word, every expression. Edward had positioned that camera specifically for moments like this, when Beatrice might feel safe enough to speak openly about what she suffered. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving London's sky a peculiar shade of greyish blue. Cecilia left early, impeccably dressed for a charity breakfast, followed by a photo shoot for a fashion magazine that would feature powerful women making a difference. Taking advantage of her absence, Edward transferred all camera recordings to a USB drive and called Mrs. Adelaide for a conversation in the study. Adelaide, I know you're scared, but I need you to be completely honest with me. I want to know everything that happened when I wasn't home. Everything Cecilia did to Beatrice. The elderly woman nervously twisted her apron. Mr. Rivers, it's difficult. Some things are so... Please, Adelaide, for Beatrice. The mention of the girl's name seemed to strengthen the housekeeper's resolve. In a trembling voice, she recounted scenes of daily humiliation, Beatrice being forced to repeat household chores dozens of times until perfection, being deprived of meals for displeasing her stepmother, being forced to stand for hours motionless as punishment for inappropriate behavior, being constantly threatened with being sent away if she told her father anything. Once, Adelaide continued, tears streaming down her wrinkled face, the girl spilled a little juice on the living room rug. Mrs. Blackwood made her clean it with her own clothes, then stay in them wet until they dried naturally. It was winter, sir. The girl shivered with cold for hours. Edward recorded the testimony on video with Mrs. Adelaide's permission. The recording would be further evidence in the case he was building against Cecilia. Meanwhile, at the SSRC office, Louisa Meadows received an unexpected visit. Regina Matthews, Cecilia's socialite friend, was sitting in front of her, visibly uncomfortable. Ms. Meadows, I came here because I'm concerned about a situation. She adjusted her pearl necklace nervously. Cecilia Blackwood called me last night. She was agitated, talking about how her husband was trying to defame her, how social workers were invading her privacy. Louisa maintained a neutral expression. And why did that bring you to me, Mrs. Matthews? Because Cecilia asked for something disturbing. She wanted me to use my influence to pressure your supervisor to close any investigation into her. Regina hesitated. Normally I would do that without a second thought. We've been friends for years. But then she said something that put me on alert. She said, if that idiotic social worker wins, I'll lose my little toy. She was talking about her own stepdaughter, as if the girl were an object. Louisa felt a shiver. The coldness with which Cecilia referred to Beatrice was further evidence of the disturbing nature of the relationship. And then I remembered small things over the years, Regina continued. How Cecilia always kept Beatrice away during our social gatherings. How she spoke of the girl with ill-disguised contempt. How she once commented that privileged children need to learn the value of humility through hard work. Would you be willing to make an official statement about this? Louisa asked carefully. Regina hesitated, obviously torn between her loyalty to a long-time friend and the growing concern for a child's well-being. If necessary, yes, but I prefer not to get publicly involved if possible. Cecilia can be vindictive. At the High Court of Justice, in central London, Judge Charles Drummond, specializing in family and child protection cases, reviewed the urgent request presented by Louisa Meadows. authorization for an in-depth investigation into Beatrice Rivers's situation, including interviews with the child conducted by specialized psychologists, without the stepmother's presence. The judge had received a call from an older colleague that morning, insinuating that the case was sensitive and involved respectable people in society. The attempt at interference only increased his determination to analyze the case with absolute impartiality. There is sufficient evidence to justify a deeper investigation, he concluded, signing the authorization, and may justice prevail regardless of who is involved. The judge's signature set a new phase of the process in motion. Now with judicial backing, the protection team could act more assertively. Back at the Sterling Tower, Edward received news of the judicial authorization with a mix of relief and anxiety. The case was advancing but also escalating. Soon there would be no turning back. When will Beatrice's interview be? He asked Louisa on the phone. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Psychosocial Assessment Center, a psychologist specializing in child trauma will conduct the conversation. You can be present but in an adjacent room observing through a one-way mirror. And Cecilia? She hasn't been officially informed yet. The judicial notification will be delivered this afternoon. Edward hung up, worried about Cecilia's reaction when she received the summons. She would not easily accept being investigated, much less see her authority over Beatrice questioned by the judicial system. As if responding to his thoughts, the apartment door opened violently. Cecilia entered like a storm, her normally composed face now distorted by rage. In her hands, the official envelope from the High Court of Justice. You actually did this? Her voice was low, dangerous. You took our private life to the courts. Exposed me as some kind of monster. Cecilia, this isn't about you or me. It's about Beatrice and her well-being. Well-being? She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. The girl has everything. Designer clothes, the best school in the city, ballet lessons, piano. What more could a child want? Love, Edward replied simply. Respect, safety, things you never gave her. Cecilia's face transformed, all pretense of civility disappearing. You will regret this, Edward. When I'm done, you'll have no company, no reputation, and no daughter. Is that a threat? It's a promise. At that instant, a small noise caught both their attention. Beatrice was standing in the living room doorway, her eyes wide with fear. She had overheard part of the argument. Beatrice, go back to your room, Cecilia ordered, instantly softening her voice. The girl didn't move, paralyzed by fear. Edward approached her, placing himself protectively between his daughter and his wife. It's okay, Bea. Why don't you go play on your tablet for a bit? Daddy needs to talk to Cecilia. Beatrice nodded, casting a final apprehensive glance at her stepmother before leaving. As soon as the girl left, Cecilia turned her attention back to Edward. Do you really think you can win this? Against me? Her confidence was almost admirable. I have friends in all the places that matter, Edward. One phone call and I can end your career. Another, and I can turn your reputation to ashes. Perhaps you could if this were just your word against mine. Edward remained calm, knowing he was at an advantage for the first time in this battle. But it's not just that anymore, Cecilia. There's evidence, witnesses, recordings. The mention of the recordings made the blood drain from her face. What recordings? You can't. It's illegal to record someone without consent. Not when there's suspicion of a crime against a child. And I must say you were quite explicit in some of your educational sessions with Beatrice. Cecilia staggered, holding onto the back of the sofa. For a moment, Edward glimpsed something he had never seen before in his wife's eyes. Fear. We can still resolve this discreetly, she tried, changing tactics. An amicable divorce. You get custody, I get a generous settlement and our reputation intact. No scandals, no embarrassing headlines. Too late, Cecilia. This is not negotiable. What you did to my daughter was unforgivable. And you will answer for it, not to me, but to justice. As the couple confronted each other in the living room, Beatrice was sitting on her bed, clutching her old teddy bear. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something forbidden by Cecilia. Hope. Her father's words, his protective stance, the way he had placed himself between her and her stepmother, they were all signs that perhaps her nightmare was finally coming to an end. With trembling hands, she picked up her secret drawing notebook. On a new page, she drew something different, A girl holding hands with a man, both smiling under a bright sun. No shadows, no menacing figures, just light and vibrant colors. The Psychosocial Support Center for Children and Adolescents, located in a discreet building in Islington, was an oasis of tranquility amidst London's chaos. With pastel-colored walls and a welcoming decor, the place had been specifically designed to make children in traumatic situations feel safe. In the waiting room, Edward held Beatrice's hand, noticing how she observed everything with cautious curiosity. The girl wore a simple dress chosen by herself, a small act of autonomy that Edward had encouraged that morning, going against Cecilia's years of aesthetic impositions. "Good morning, Beatrice." A middle-aged woman with curly hair and a gentle smile approached. "My name is Dr. Helen Stone. We're going to chat a little today. What do you think?" The girl looked at her father, seeking approval. Edward smiled encouragingly. "It's okay, B. Dr. Helen is very nice, and I'll be right here waiting." The psychologist specializing in child trauma led Beatrice to a colorful room full of toys, books, and art supplies. Through the one-way mirror, Edward watched alongside Louisa Meadows and a representative from the public prosecutor's office, Prosecutor Renee Fields. Dr. Helen began with simple questions about school and favorite activities, allowing Beatrice to gradually relax. After some time, the girl was talking more fluently, though she still carefully measured her words. "Beatrice, I'm going to show you some pictures of faces with different expressions, and I'd like you to tell me how you feel in different situations, okay?" The psychologist presented cards with drawings of faces expressing various emotions: happiness, sadness, fear, anger. The girl nodded, taking the cards carefully. "How do you feel when you're at school?" Beatrice hesitated before choosing the neutral face. "Normal," she explained in a low voice. "And when you're playing with other children?" Another moment of hesitation. Beatrice looked at the door, as if checking if she was really alone with the psychologist, before selecting the confused face. "I don't know how to play properly," she admitted. "The other children think I'm strange." Behind the mirror, Edward felt a tightening in his chest. "And how do you feel when you're at home?" Dr. Helen asked, maintaining a casual tone. Beatrice froze, her fingers hovering over the cards. Finally, she selected the scared face. "Can you tell me why you chose that one?" The girl bit her lip, looking at the door again. "I can't. Everything we talk about here is just between us, Beatrice. No one will be angry with you, I promise." "She'll know." Beatrice's voice was almost inaudible. "She always knows." "Who, dear?" "Mother Cecilia." Beatrice hugged herself, as if suddenly feeling cold. "She said if I tell anyone about things, I'll go to a horrible place far from Daddy, a place for children who don't know how to behave." Dr. Helen maintained a calm expression, though her eyes revealed concern. "What things, Beatrice?" "You can show me if you prefer not to speak." The girl hesitated again before picking up paper and pencils from the table. With quick, nervous strokes, she drew a small figure kneeling on the floor with red hands, while a tall figure watched with a cruel smile. In another drawing, she showed the small figure sitting alone at an empty table, while others ate. "Does this happen often?" the psychologist asked gently. Beatrice nodded, silent tears beginning to stream down her face. "When she gets angry, when I don't do things right." "And what would doing things right be, Beatrice?" "Cleaning without leaving any dirt. Arranging without leaving anything out of place. Only speaking when she allows it. And never crying loudly." Behind the mirror, Edward fought back his own tears. Louisa placed a hand on his shoulder in a gesture of silent support, while the prosecutor made frantic notes. "Beatrice," continued Dr. Helen, "you know that children shouldn't do this kind of work, right? Nor go without eating as punishment. That's not normal nor correct. But she says it's for my own good, for me to learn to be a good girl." "And what happens if you tell your father?" Beatrice lowered her eyes. "She says Daddy won't believe me. That adults always believe other adults, not children. And that if he believes, he'll be sad with me for making him fight with her." The session continued for another hour. Gradually, encouraged by the psychologist's welcoming demeanor, Beatrice revealed more details about her life under Cecilia's control, the disproportionate punishments, the constant humiliations, the veiled threats, and most disturbingly, the calculated performance of affection her stepmother presented when Edward was present. When the interview ended, Beatrice ran into her father's arms as soon as she saw him. Edward hugged her tightly, silently vowing never again to let her suffer. "Mr. Rivers," said Dr. Helen, "after Beatrice was taken by Louisa to see the centre's garden, your daughter shows clear signs of prolonged psychological abuse. She has developed typical defense mechanisms: hypervigilance, constant fear, difficulty expressing emotions openly, excessively obedient behavior. How long will it take for her to recover?" Edward's voice faltered. "Trauma doesn't disappear overnight, Mr. Rivers, but children are surprisingly resilient when given adequate support. With regular therapy and a loving, safe environment, Beatrice has every chance to overcome this experience." Prosecutor Renee Fields approached, her normally serious face now softened by compassion. "Mr. Rivers, based on what we saw today, combined with the evidence already collected, I have sufficient grounds to request the immediate suspension of contact between your daughter and Mrs. Blackwood, as well as a protective order preventing any contact." "What about permanent custody?" Edward asked, concerned. "That's a longer process, but with Dr. Helen's report, witness testimonies and the recordings you obtained, we have a solid case. I will request urgency from Judge Drummond." Meanwhile, in the luxurious Albright & Partners law firm, on the top floor of a skyscraper on Oxford Street, Cecilia Blackwood faced an uncomfortable reality. Before her, Mr. Maurice Albright, one of the city's most expensive and respected lawyers, analyzed the case documents with a grave expression. "Cecilia, I need to be frank." He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The situation is more serious than you initially presented to me. We're talking about substantial evidence, audio-visual recordings, witness testimonies, including long-term employees, reports from child development specialists, and now, from what you tell me, a forensic interview with the child herself. Evidence can be contested." "Maurice," Cecilia's tone remained confident, though a pulsating vein in her temple revealed her tension. "Recordings can be manipulated. Witnesses can be pressured. Specialists can be contradicted by other specialists. Under normal circumstances, yes. But the quantity and quality of evidence in this case," the lawyer hesitated. "Frankly, we are facing a difficult battle, and the way the prosecution is handling the case suggests they are considering not only the suspension of your parental authority, but possibly criminal charges of child abuse." The word criminal made Cecilia blanch. For the first time, the gravity of her situation seemed to fully hit her. "That's ridiculous. Educating a child with discipline is now a crime?" She stood up, walking nervously around the office. "Turning a spoiled girl into someone responsible is abuse? What do they prefer? That we raise a generation of entitled, useless people?" "Cecilia, forcing a 7-year-old child to perform strenuous household chores, depriving her of food as punishment, and subjecting her to systematic psychological humiliation goes far beyond discipline." The lawyer was direct. "If half of what's in these reports is true, you've crossed several legal lines. It doesn't matter what they say. It matters what they can prove." Cecilia recomposed her posture. "And more importantly, it matters who I am. I am Cecilia Blackwood. My name is on hospital wings, in charity foundations." "Who is this social worker? Who is this prosecutor?" "Nobody," Mr. Maurice sighed. He knew this type of client well. Powerful people who believed they were above the law, accustomed to solving problems with money and influence. Usually he could find loopholes, agreements, elegant exits. But this time the evidence was too robust, the case too emotional, and the assigned judge, Charles Drummond, known for his incorruptible integrity. "I'll be direct, Cecilia. Your social connections and philanthropic reputation may mitigate some consequences, but they won't make them disappear. My professional recommendation is for us to seek a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" The contempt was evident in her voice. "One where you voluntarily grant full custody to Edward, waive any visitation rights until Beatrice is old enough to decide if she wants to see you, and commit to seeking therapeutic help." "Unacceptable." Cecilia picked up her Hermes bag, preparing to leave. "If you can't win this case for me, Maurice, I'll find someone who can." The lawyer watched her walk to the door, her usual elegant and confident stride, but noticed something different. A slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands, a tension in her normally relaxed shoulders. Cecilia Blackwood was afraid, perhaps for the first time in her privileged life. At the High Court of Justice, Judge Charles Drummond reviewed the preliminary reports of the case while awaiting the arrival of prosecutor Renee Fields. His phone rang. It was Justice Silverton, an old acquaintance and influential figure in the London judiciary. "Charles, I heard you have the Rivers Blackwood family case." "Yes, a quite serious child abuse case." The judge maintained a neutral tone, already suspecting the reason for the call. "Well, that's why I called." The justice's voice sounded casual, almost uninterested. "I know Cecilia Blackwood from social events. An admirable woman dedicated to children's causes. Hard to believe these accusations. With all due respect, Justice, I prefer to base my decisions on the evidence presented, not on social impressions." There was a tense pause. Of course. I just thought you should know there's additional context. The husband, Edward Rivers, has political ambitions, from what I hear. And you know how these marital disputes can be when power and money are involved. "I appreciate your concern," the judge replied coldly, "but I assure you I will conduct this case with the same impartiality as all others under my responsibility." Hanging up, Judge Drummond made a mental note of the attempt at influence. It wasn't the first time he had received such a call, and certainly wouldn't be the last. But cases involving children always awakened in him a special determination to ensure justice was done, regardless of the social status of those involved. A knock on the door announced the arrival of prosecutor Renee Fields, accompanied by Louisa Meadows. The two women had serious and determined expressions. "Prosecutor Fields, Miss Meadows, welcome," the judge greeted. "I presume you bring news about the Rivers case?" "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecutor placed a folder on the table. "We have just concluded the forensic interview with Beatrice Rivers. The results corroborate all previous suspicions of systematic psychological abuse. Dr. Helen Stone, who conducted the interview, classified the case as one of the most severe she has encountered in terms of manipulation and psychological control." "And the child? How is she?" "Scared, confused, but showing signs of relief at finally being able to talk about what she experienced," Louisa replied. "It is evident that she developed a bond of fear with her stepmother, and that this fear was deliberately cultivated as a form of control." The judge examined the detailed psychologist's report, the interview transcripts, and the drawings made by Beatrice during the session. Each page confirmed the seriousness of the situation. "Based on this, I am requesting an urgent protective order," the prosecutor declared. "We want to ensure that Cecilia Blackwood has no access to the child, while the process of termination of parental rights is pending." "Granted," the judge decided promptly. "I will issue the order today. Mrs. Blackwood will be notified and must keep at least 100 meters away from the minor. As for residence, Mr. Rivers has already arranged temporary accommodation for himself and his daughter," Louisa informed. "An apartment in the Canary Wharf district away from the Sterling Tower." "Excellent." Now regarding the criminal aspect of this case, the discussion continued for another hour, defining the next legal steps and the necessary measures to protect Beatrice while the judicial system did its work. In the temporary apartment in Canary Wharf, Edward watched Beatrice sleep in the hastily decorated but lovingly arranged room. They had moved that afternoon, bringing only the essentials: clothes, favorite toys, the old teddy bear the girl loved so much. Sitting in the armchair beside his daughter's bed, Edward reflected on how a seemingly perfect life could hide so much pain. For years he had been proud to provide Beatrice with everything money could buy: the best education, the most luxurious home, designer clothes, expensive toys. But he had failed to give her the most important things: protection, emotional security, the certainty of being loved unconditionally. His phone vibrated with a message from Louisa. "Protective order granted. Cecilia is officially prohibited from approaching Beatrice. Stay strong, you are on the right track." A wave of relief washed over him. It was just the beginning of a long journey, but for the first time since he discovered the truth about Cecilia, he felt they were safe. Beatrice could finally begin to heal. The girl stirred in bed, opening her eyes sleepily. "Daddy, are you still here?" "Yes, Princess. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Edward gently held her small hand. "She won't find us here, will she?" "No, Bee, she can't get near you now. It's the law." The girl seemed to process this information, an expression of disbelief mixed with hope on her small face. Even if she's important? Even if she knows powerful people? Even so, some things are stronger than money or power, B. The truth is one of them. And now many people know the truth about what happened to you. Beatrice was silent for a moment, as if contemplating something too profound for her childish words to express. Finally she asked, "Daddy, can I draw tomorrow?" "Whatever I want?" The simplicity of the request, so basic for any child but so significant for someone who had lived under constant control, brought tears to Edward's eyes. "Of course you can, my love. I'll buy all the colors you want." "All of them?" Her eyes widened at the possibility. "All of them. And paper and brushes and Play-Doh and anything else you want to express yourself." Beatrice smiled, a genuine smile, not the restrained and carefully practiced smile Cecilia demanded. Edward realized he hadn't seen that true smile in years. "Thank you, Daddy," she yawned, her little eyes heavy with sleep. "I think I'll dream in colors today." "Dream beautiful things, Princess." Edward kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow will be a new day. A better day." As Beatrice drifted back to sleep, Edward sent a message to Mrs. Adelaide inviting her to come work for them in the new apartment. The response was immediate and emotional. "Thank God. I'll be there first thing tomorrow, sir. I'll make that chocolate cake the girl loves so much." In the Sterling Tower penthouse, Cecilia Blackwood received the judicial notification with an impassive expression. The bailiff, accustomed to explosive reactions, was surprised by her apparent calm. As soon as she was alone, however, the mask of composure fell. In a fit of rage, she hurled a crystal vase against the wall, watching it shatter into 1,000 glittering pieces. The metaphor did not go unnoticed. Like the vase, her carefully constructed life was falling apart. Her phone rang. It was Gustav Miller, the newspaper owner she had contacted days earlier. "Cecilia, we need to talk about that situation you mentioned." His voice was carefully neutral. "I received a call from the prosecution. They have quite convincing evidence." "So what?" "You promised to support me, Gustav." "Cecilia, if half of what they said is true..." He hesitated. "Look, I'm your friend, but I also have a newspaper to run, so I can't get involved in a smear campaign against authorities who are just doing their job, especially in a case involving a child." "I understand." The coldness returned to her voice. "So even you are abandoning me?" "It's not abandonment, it's but Cecilia had already hung up. One by one, the phone calls followed that night. Influential friends backing off, allies questioning, supporters hesitating. The social empire Cecilia had built over years was crumbling as rapidly as her facade of a perfect wife and stepmother had collapsed. Alone in the luxurious penthouse that was once her kingdom, Cecilia faced her reflection in the entrance hall mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Impeccable hair, perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, but eyes empty of any genuine emotion. For the first time in her adult life, Cecilia Blackwood faced a battle she couldn't win with money, influence, or manipulation. A battle against the naked truth of who she really was. And the truth, as Edward had told Beatrice, was stronger than any power. Autumn in London covered Hyde Park with a golden carpet of leaves. Sitting on a bench near the lake, Beatrice watched the ducks swim peacefully, holding a chocolate ice cream, a small pleasure that, months ago, would have been unthinkable under Cecilia's watchful eyes. "Are you enjoying the outing, Princess?" Edward asked, sitting beside his daughter. "Very much, Daddy," she smiled, a smile that was increasingly frequent and genuine. "Can I give some bread to the ducks later?" "Of course you can." 3 months had passed since the move to the Canary Wharf apartment. 3 months of weekly therapy with Dr. Helen, of new routines, of rediscovering what it meant to be a child. Beatrice's transformation was visible. Her shoulders were no longer perpetually tense. Her gaze no longer constantly checked if something was out of place. Her voice was no longer a fearful whisper. "You know, B," Edward began, choosing his words carefully. "Tomorrow we'll have that hearing I explained to you, remember?" The girl nodded, her expression momentarily serious. "Where the judge will decide if Mother Cecilia can see me or not." "That's right. And I wanted you to know that no matter what happens, you are safe. I will never let anyone hurt you again." Beatrice was silent for a moment, contemplating the ice cream that was beginning to melt. "Daddy," Dr. Helen said, "I can choose if I want to see Mother Cecilia or not." "Is that true?" "Yes, it's true. The judge will listen to what you want, and that will be very important for his decision. What if I never want to see her again? The girl's voice was low, almost ashamed. Is that being a bad person? Edward felt his heart ache. Even after months of therapy, Beatrice still carried the weight of guilt that was not hers. No, my love, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's a choice you have the right to make, based on what makes you feel safe and happy. The conversation was interrupted by Edward's phone ringing. It was Louisa Meadows. Edward, we have an unexpected development. Cecilia requested an independent psychological evaluation. She's claiming the entire process was conducted partially against her. Could that delay the final decision? Concern was evident in his voice. Possibly, but Judge Drummond is experienced enough not to allow dilatory tactics. I just wanted you to be prepared, should the matter arise tomorrow at the hearing. Hanging up, Edward noticed that Beatrice was watching him intently. For months she had learned to read expressions and micro-signals to anticipate dangers. A survival instinct developed under Cecilia's regime. Is everything all right, Daddy? Yes, Bea, just some details about tomorrow. Nothing to worry about. He smiled, trying to dissipate the tension. So shall we feed these ducks? In Prosecutor Renee Field's office, the prosecutor analyzed the new documents presented by Cecilia Blackwood's defense. The request for an independent psychological evaluation was just one of the strategies in a growing pile of procedural maneuvers. She's playing for delay, Renee commented to Louisa, who was reviewing the documents beside her. First she questioned Dr. Helen's competence, then she tried to disqualify Mrs. Adelaide's testimony by claiming emotional bond with the child. Now she wants a new psychological evaluation. Classic tactic to exhaust resources and patience. Does it work? Louisa asked, concerned. Sometimes. Many families give up in the middle of the process, accepting disadvantageous settlements just to end the legal nightmare. The prosecutor closed the folder with determination. But not this time. We have solid evidence, an honest judge, and most importantly, Edward is not alone in this battle. Meanwhile, in the luxurious apartment Cecilia had rented after leaving the Sterling Tower penthouse, now occupied only by Edward and Beatrice, the socialite received her new lawyer, Mr. Roger Thompson, known for his aggressive and questionable tactics. What we need is to change the narrative, Roger explained, gesturing dramatically. You are not the villain of this story, Cecilia. You are a dedicated woman who tried to set boundaries for a spoiled child by an absent father who suddenly decided to play Father of the Year. Exactly. Cecilia stood up, walking around the elegantly decorated room. Edward always neglected Beatrice's education. When I tried to introduce discipline and responsibility, he turned me into a monster. We need people to testify to your character, your dedication to children's causes. Directors of institutions you supported, children who benefited from your projects. Cecilia smiled, satisfied. Finally, a lawyer who understood her position. I have a list of contacts who would be happy to speak on my behalf. Important, respected people. Excellent. And what about Edward? Is there anything in his past we can use? Any slip, any questionable behavior as a father? The socialite reflected for a moment. In the first few years after Beatrice's mother's death, he practically abandoned the girl with nannies and staff. He worked 18 hours a day, traveled constantly. There are records of several school meetings he didn't attend. Perfect. We'll build a narrative of an absent father who suddenly decides to use his daughter as a weapon against you. A man resentful of your social success, your independence. Cecilia nodded, feeling her power return. With the right strategy, she could still emerge victorious from that battle. Not to regain Beatrice, the girl had always been a burden, a constant reminder that Edward had loved another woman before her, but to preserve her public image, her status, her influence. The next morning, Westminster courts buzzed with the usual weekday activity. In the courtroom designated for the Rivers case, Judge Charles Drummond reviewed the final documents while awaiting the arrival of the parties. Edward entered accompanied by his lawyer, Mr. Paul Mountain, a family law specialist with vast experience in child abuse cases. Louisa and Prosecutor Renee were already waiting, conversing in low voices. Minutes later, Cecilia made her triumphant entrance, impeccably styled hair, a designer pastel suit, discreet but perfect makeup. Her new lawyer followed closely behind, carrying a visibly full brief. "All rise," announced the bailiff when Judge Drummond returned to the room. The hearing began with the usual formalities. The judge briefly reviewed the case, confirmed the presence of all involved parties, and established the rules for the day's proceedings. "Before we proceed," Mr. Roger began, "the defense would like to formally request a new psychological evaluation of the minor, conducted by an independent professional chosen by the court." Judge Drummond adjusted his glasses, examining the presented document. "Mr. Thompson, this is the third similar request in less than a month. We already have detailed reports from Dr. Helen Stone, a respected professional with over 20 years of experience." "Your Honor, with all due respect, we question Dr. Stone's impartiality, as she maintains a professional relationship with the social worker who initiated this process." Cecilia's lawyer smiled confidently. "We merely seek a fair process where both sides are adequately represented." Prosecutor Renee stood up. "Your Honor, this is clearly an effort to unnecessarily prolong the process. The defense has already had ample opportunity to present its own specialists and evidence. More importantly, the continuation of this uncertainty is detrimental to Beatrice's emotional well-being." The judge considered for a moment, then denied the request firmly. "I see no basis to question Dr. Stone's competence or impartiality. Her report is comprehensive, methodologically sound, and consistent with other evidence presented. We will proceed with the hearing as planned." Cecilia's expression hardened momentarily before returning to her mask of serenity. For the next 2 hours, both sides presented their final arguments. Edward's team showed edited excerpts of the recordings obtained by the hidden cameras, testimonies from Mrs. Adelaide and teacher Rachel, and Dr. Helen's detailed report on Beatrice's emotional state. Cecilia's defense counter-argued by presenting testimonies from public figures who attested to her character and dedication to children's causes, questioning the legality of recordings obtained without consent, and painting a portrait of Edward as a historically negligent father who suddenly decided to interfere in his daughter's education. When all arguments had been presented, Judge Drummond paused before announcing, "Before rendering my decision, I would like to speak with Beatrice Rivers in my chambers, as provided by the Children Act. Only Dr. Helen and I will be present." Edward nodded, while Cecilia maintained a neutral expression, though her gaze betrayed a hint of concern. In the judge's welcoming chambers, specifically decorated to make children comfortable, Beatrice entered holding Dr. Helen's hand. Wearing a simple, comfortable dress and colorful sneakers, a choice symbolizing her gradual liberation from Cecilia's imposed aesthetic control, the girl observed the environment with cautious curiosity. "Hello, Beatrice," the judge greeted gently without his intimidating robe, sitting in a low armchair to be at the child's level. "My name is Charles. My job is to help children like you have a happy and safe life." "Hi," Beatrice replied shyly, sitting in the indicated chair. "Dr. Helen explained that you are a judge." "That's right, and today I'm trying to decide what's best for you. But for that, I need your help. Can you tell me what it's been like living with just your father?" Gradually, encouraged by the judge's gentle demeanor and Dr. Helen's comforting presence, Beatrice began to speak. She talked about park outings, the swimming lessons she had recently started, how Mrs. Adelaide made chocolate cakes on weekends, and how she could draw and play without fear of being punished for making a mess or making noise. "And how do you feel when you think about Cecilia?" the judge asked carefully. Beatrice was silent, looking at her own hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but determined. "I'm scared of her. I don't want to see her again." "Are you sure about that? It's an important decision." The girl nodded, her eyes now meeting the judge's with a surprising determination for someone so young. "When she's around, I can't breathe properly. I keep expecting to do something wrong and be punished. I don't want to feel like that anymore." Charles Drummond had heard similar testimonies throughout his 20-year career, but the clarity with which Beatrice expressed her fear impressed him. This was not a child manipulated by her father against her stepmother, as Cecilia's defense tried to portray. This was a traumatized child who was finally finding her voice. Back in the courtroom, The judge resumed his seat. His face, normally impenetrable, revealed a gravity that immediately silenced the room. Having considered all the evidence presented, the specialist's reports, and after speaking directly with Beatrice Rivers, he began, "I am ready to deliver my decision." Edward took a deep breath, while Cecilia adjusted her posture, maintaining an appearance of confidence. The verdict was about to be announced, and with it, the fate of a family fragmented by lies and cruelty hidden behind golden doors. This court rules for the definitive suspension of Cecilia Blackwood's parental rights concerning the minor Beatrice Rivers. Judge Drummond's voice echoed through the silent room. Furthermore, I issue a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact between Mrs. Blackwood and the minor until she reaches adulthood or, if she so wishes upon turning 16, requests a review of this decision. Cecilia visibly paled, her perfectly made-up face unable to hide the shock. Her lawyer quickly leaned in to whisper something in her ear, likely about appeal possibilities, but she seemed momentarily unable to process any information. Additionally, the judge continued, I refer to the public prosecutor's office a recommendation for a criminal investigation into the accusations of mistreatment and psychological abuse. Full custody of Beatrice Rivers remains with her father, Edward Rivers, with regular psychological support for the minor and quarterly reports to Child Protection Services for a period of 1 year. Edward briefly closed his eyes, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. There were no real winners in that situation, only the hope that finally Beatrice could begin to live the childhood she deserved. When the judge adjourned the session, Cecilia stood up abruptly. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, now burned with barely contained rage. She walked directly towards Edward, who was getting up to leave. "This isn't over," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." "It is over, Cecilia," Edward replied calmly. "It ended the moment I saw my daughter kneeling on that marble floor. The rest was just the time needed for justice to confirm what I already knew." Before she could respond, her lawyer gently pulled her arm. "Come on, Cecilia. This is neither the time nor the place." Outside the courthouse, some reporters waited. The case had received limited media attention, partly due to the prosecution's efforts to protect Beatrice from exposure, partly due to the influence Cecilia still held in certain journalistic circles. "Mr. Rivers, any statement on the decision?" a young reporter asked, microphone in hand. "Only that we are relieved and grateful to justice," Edward replied briefly. "Now our focus is on my daughter's well-being and recovery. We ask for respect for our privacy at this time." Louisa Meadows, who observed the scene a few steps back, smiled discreetly. Edward had come a long way from the appearance-obsessed businessman she had met months ago. His priorities had completely changed. A week after the court decision, life in the Canary Wharf apartment found a new rhythm. Edward had drastically reduced his workload, delegating responsibilities to trusted executives to be more present in Beatrice's life. That Saturday morning found father and daughter in the kitchen, attempting, with mixed results, to prepare pancakes under Mrs. Adelaide's amused supervision. "I think this one looks more like a map than a pancake," Beatrice laughed, observing her misshapen creation in the frying pan. "It's an artistic pancake," Edward solemnly declared, making his daughter laugh even more. The sound of that carefree laughter, something that had been so rare in previous years, was the sweetest music to Edward. Every new laugh, every moment of genuine joy from Beatrice was a small victory against the dark past. The intercom rang announcing visitors. It was Louisa, accompanied by Dr. Helen. The two had become a constant presence in the family's life, not just as professionals, but as friends, important bridges between the trauma of the past and the construction of a healthier future. "We brought something special," Louisa announced, handing a colorful package to Beatrice. The girl opened the gift with enthusiasm, revealing a professional art supplies set: paints, brushes, colored pencils, small canvases, clay. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "It's for the project we talked about in our last session, remember?" Dr. Helen explained, smiling gently. "Expressing feelings through art." "Can I start now?" Beatrice asked, already reverently holding one of the brushes. After breakfast, Princess, Edward replied. Our artistic pancakes are almost ready. Meanwhile, in an apartment in the Chelsea area, Cecilia Blackwood stared at her laptop screen with a grim expression. The news in the social columns, once filled with praise for her elegance and philanthropy, now treated her situation with distant coldness, or worse, with malicious insinuations. Invitations to charity events had drastically decreased. Old friends did not return her calls. Hypocrites, she muttered to herself, closing the laptop forcefully. All of them. Her new lawyer had prepared appeals to contest the court decision, but even he had privately admitted that the chances were remote. The case had been impeccably handled, the evidence was substantial, and Beatrice's own testimony, described in the records as clear and consistent, weighed heavily against any review. The phone rang, interrupting her bitter thoughts. It was her. Sister Teresa, the only family member who still maintained regular contact. How are you, Cece? Teresa's concern was genuine. How do you think I am? My life is in ruins. Have you considered the suggestion I made about seeking therapeutic help? Cecilia scoffed. Therapy for what? For some charlatan to tell me I have unresolved issues with my own mother? Nonsense. Teresa sighed on the other end of the line. It's not nonsense, Cecilia. What you did to that child is not normal. It's not healthy. And perhaps if you understand why you acted that way, you can start to rebuild your life. My life is great, Cecilia replied automatically, the lie sounding false even to her own ears. So I just need time for people to forget this misunderstanding. Cece, that wasn't a misunderstanding. You hurt an innocent child repeatedly, deliberately. Teresa's voice was firm now. And until you acknowledge that, truly acknowledge it, nothing will change. The call ended shortly after, leaving Cecilia alone with thoughts she preferred to avoid. Deep down in a corner she rarely allowed to be illuminated, she knew Teresa was right. There was something profoundly wrong in the way she had treated Beatrice, something that went beyond simple dislike for a stepdaughter. The following months brought significant changes for everyone involved. Edward finally sold the Sterling Tower penthouse, choosing with Beatrice a house with a garden in Hampstead Heath. The move was symbolic, a definitive departure from the scene where so many traumas had occurred. Beatrice continued her therapy with Dr. Helen, making remarkable progress. The nightmares once frequent became rare. Her posture, once always defensive, gradually relaxed. At the new school, where she had been transferred, she began to form friendships, slowly learning to trust other people besides her father and Mrs. Adelaide. One sunny spring afternoon, Edward came home early from work and found Beatrice in the garden, painting intently. He approached silently, observing the canvas taking shape under his daughter's brushes. The painting showed a girl, clearly Beatrice, holding hands with a tall man, walking along a colorful path. Behind them, dark shadows lingered, while ahead, the sun shone over vibrant flowers. "It's beautiful, Bea," Edward commented, sitting beside his daughter. "It's for Dr. Helen's project," Beatrice explained, without stopping painting. "She asked me to show my journey of feelings." "And what do those feelings tell you?" Beatrice considered the question seriously, as she always did now that she was learning to value her own perceptions and emotions. "They say we're leaving the bad things behind, so that we're walking towards a better place." She pointed to a small detail Edward hadn't initially noticed, a third, smaller figure, almost hidden in the shadows. "She's back there in the shadows. But she's not following us. She's staying behind." Edward understood that the figure represented Cecilia, and his heart filled with a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Beatrice was processing the trauma in a healthy way. Sadness for the situation as a whole. Renewed determination to do everything possible to ensure his daughter continued her path of healing. "You know what else Dr. Helen said?" Beatrice continued, mixing paints to create a new shade of blue for the sky. "That sometimes people who hurt other people are hurt too. That maybe Mother Cecilia doesn't know how to love properly because no one showed her how." The wisdom of those words, coming from an 8-year-old child who had been through so much, deeply moved Edward. "Dr. Helen is very wise, and so are you, you know." Beatrice shrugged, but a small proud smile appeared on her lips. "I'm just repeating what she said." "No, you're understanding. They're different things." The sun began to set, casting golden hues over the garden. Edward watched his daughter painting peacefully, reflecting on the journey they had taken. From a seemingly perfect family, but corroded from within, to this moment of authenticity and healing, the path had been painful but necessary. A few months later, in her elegant Knightsbridge office, Dr. Lucy Fields observed her most challenging patient completing another therapy session. "It's still hard for me," Cecilia admitted, her voice softer than usual, "to admit that what I did wasn't wrong." "It's a process, Cecilia. Acknowledgement is the first step, but perhaps the most difficult," the therapist replied. "The important thing is that you're here, working on it." In fact, Cecilia had started therapy primarily to rehabilitate her image, as she had confided in the first sessions. But gradually, as she explored her own childhood under emotionally distant and demanding parents, she began to glimpse the roots of her behavior with Beatrice. I think I saw her as a rival," she confessed, the words painful in her mouth, not consciously but on some level. "She had Edward's love in a way I never would, an unconditional love that didn't need to be earned or conquered. And how do you feel about that now?" Cecilia was silent for a long moment, ashamed and sad. Mostly sad. It wasn't complete regret, not yet, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall of denial and justification she had built over years. Meanwhile, in Hampstead Heath, Edward organized a small celebration for Beatrice's 9th birthday. Nothing extravagant. Beatrice had developed an aversion to large social events, associating them with the ostentatious parties Cecilia organized to impress her high society friends. Just a few children from school, Louisa, Dr. Helen, Mrs. Adelaide, and her family. In the garden decorated with colorful balloons, Beatrice blew out the candles on her chocolate cake, made by Mrs. Adelaide, not by some renowned pastry chef, as everyone sang happy birthday. Her face, lit up by simple and genuine joy, was the greatest gift Edward could wish for. Later, when the guests had left and Beatrice was playing with her presents, Louisa pulled Edward aside for a private conversation. "I received news about Cecilia," she said in a low voice. "She's in therapy regularly. Her social worker said there seems to be some genuine progress." Edward nodded, not knowing exactly how to feel about this information. "Do you think she'll ever truly understand what she did?" "Perhaps. The human mind is complex, Edward. People can change if they truly want to and work for it." Louisa smiled softly. "But the most important thing is what I see here now. Beatrice is flourishing. You've built a safe home for her, an environment where she can be a child again." Across the garden, Beatrice laughed as she played with a puppy, a surprise gift from Edward that she had asked for years, but which Cecilia had always refused, citing dirt and mess. The sound of that free, carefree laughter was confirmation that they were, finally, on the right track. That night, as he put Beatrice to bed, Edward noticed a new drawing hanging on the bedroom wall, the last work in the therapeutic series proposed by Dr. Helen. It showed a colorful house, with flowers around it, a puppy in the garden, and 3 smiling figures, Beatrice, Edward and Mrs. Adelaide. In the blue sky, a large sun shone, and written in childish letters at the top of the page was a single word: now. Edward understood the meaning. Not before or after, not past or future, but the present, the moment that truly mattered. Beatrice was learning to live in the now, free from the weight of past shadows. "Good night, my love," he whispered, kissing his daughter's forehead. "Dream beautiful things." "Daddy?" Beatrice's sleepy voice stopped him at the door. "You know what Dr. Helen told me today? That I'm clean inside now." I understood what she meant. It's like before there was dirt inside me that wouldn't come out no matter how much I scrubbed, but now it's gone. The child's simple words perfectly captured the essence of her journey, from pain to healing, from darkness to light. Edward felt his eyes well up. "Yes, Bea, you are clean, inside and out, and you'll stay that way, I promise." As he closed the bedroom door, leaving his daughter to sleep peacefully, Edward reflected on the long road they had traveled. From the tears on the cold marble of the Sterling Tower penthouse to the warm laughter in this new home, from lies and appearances to liberating truth. Their story had not ended. There was still much to heal, much to build, but now finally it was a story of hope.